Hey, Juan Santos here. So we're going to go into understanding the different type of psychometric instruments you can use or the different type of psych tests you can use when working with writing immigration evaluations. Now what I have here is I have a folder, if you will, and in this folder I have all the different tests that I use when working with clients. And one of the first things that I want you to consider is that the instrument that you're going to use is going to be dependent not just on the client that you work with, it's going to be also dependent on the case that you're working with and on the attorney collaboration. Now let's first start with the attorney collaboration. Work with your attorney to see if it's needed to use an instrument. There's many different cases that you work with where there's sufficient information, meaning that you're able to provide that proof, that strength, and that power to the evaluation that you don't need that secondary proof or validity, if you will, from the psychometric test. Now that's where your attorney is going to be able to have that communication, that dialogue with you. Another area to look at would be the client itself. Is the client able to competently read the evaluation? Are they able to, is there, I'm sorry, not the evaluation, the test. Is the test in that client's language? So it's a different area that you want to look at. Now with the test, that's probably what you want me to talk about. With this, with the psychometric instrument, the ones that I normally use, the one that I consistently use is the Beck inventory for anxiety and depression, the GAD, the PHQ-9, and then depending if I'm bringing in a family, I may throw an inventory to look at that relationship. Now the reasons that I stick to those four inventories is that they pull information from anxiety, they pull information from depression, and then that's where naturally most of not just someone going through the immigration process, but individuals in themselves, when they're struggling with X, Y, or Z, they're going to exhibit symptoms that are more connected to that anxiety side, that worry side, because as humans, we worry about things, or they're going to be more connected to that sadness side, because again, as people, we experience sadness depending on certain things that are going on in life. Now, the purpose of the instrument, that's the most important factor that I look at. Why am I going to utilize this instrument in this immigration evaluation? And that's very much dependent on the information brought from the client. Now, as an example of that, let's say I'm working with a U visa case and the individual went through some sort of traumatic experience. Then I would utilize, let's say, an anxiety instrument or even the GAD, the anxiety Beck instrument. I would utilize that instrument to be able to identify if the client is showing a high level of anxiety, a high level of symptom. And then if so, I can interconnect that test and show that based off of the client's traumatic experience, the client's experiencing XYZ symptoms, and in addition, that's connected to the client disclosure, in addition, that is connected to the psychometric test. And then one of the purposes or the purpose of instruments is to allow us to see what's next. Just like a diagnosis as mental health professionals allows us to identify the individual struggling, let's say, with a major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder, and then from that next step, we can go into, okay, what do we need to do next? Do we need to provide outpatient therapy? Do we need to provide X, Y, or Z? What are the recommendations based on the analysis? So hopefully this was helpful in your ability to understand different instruments that you can utilize. But again, the most important factor is not just the instruments themselves. It's the purpose of why you're using the instrument, and is the instrument going to help the evaluation? Is it going to help to show what you're trying to show to your findings, if you will? I apologize, I kind of went on a little stutter mode there, but let's backtrack a little bit. So you're writing the evaluation, and then you're working with this client. You have a summary section, and you have a section in there where you show the findings, right? And then in that is where you want to pull in that instrument. You want to pull in that if it's needed to say, this is what I see as a clinician. And based off of X, Y, Z that's taking place in the patient's life, here's the recommendations. And then as an example, we could use one as a U visa where you may utilize those test instruments to show that they are showing those high level of anxiety. And then that connects to, let's say, the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. And then that connects to a potential recommendation where you're encouraging that individual, you're providing that recommendation that based off of the symptoms you're showing, at least in our evaluation, the next step to continue to support your mental health treatment and recovery is to engage in outpatient therapy with individual therapy, maybe to explore medication management. But again, we always have that interconnected principle. So as a takeaway message, I really encourage you to communicate with different clinicians like myself that work in immigration evaluations. Ask questions as far as what type of instruments you utilize. Second area to look at is your communication with your attorney. talk to them and see if it's needed per the evaluation. They're going to have that insight. They're going to know to what degree the client does or does not qualify. Or they're going to be able to identify in the evaluation if it would support to show a stronger, more powerful form of validity, if you will. And again, when I use the word validity, what I'm looking at is that if you have that consistency as far as the patient showing X symptom, and then the test in itself also highlights X symptoms, so then you have that stack effect, you have that validity to give your evaluation power, if you will. And then the third principle to look at would be to make sure that you're remaining professional and ethical. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I abide by the ACA Code of Ethics. So with that, I make sure that when I use instruments, I can use the instrument, right? We want to make sure that we're able to use the instrument. Second, I make sure that my client is able to understand, to read, that their education levels fit for that instrument, that they fit the age norm and all the norm that's connected to the instrument. And then you want to make sure that your instrument's got reliability. You want to make sure that your instrument has validity. The last thing you want to do is to turn something in that's going to get tossed out. All right. Well, hopefully this was helpful in your understanding of why to use a psychometric instrument, which ones to use, and then how to navigate that within your immigration case. Take care.